Okay, so professors, as you reckon, as you remember, we have discussed the communication in business, and so far we've been able to define it, look at the various forms of communication and the various modes of communication, right? And I remember we spoke about the channels of communication, which we said could be horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. We saw the vertical can be upward or downward, right? So this case is to test our knowledge on what we discussed so far. Okay, I thought I saw something in the chat. Let me see of Eunice. So Eunice, the test is right now as the class is ongoing. So what I'll do is I'll read the question to you. Just provide the answers. So on your sheet, if case 1 is upward, downward, diagonal, horizontal, you just indicate it. Okay. So by the time I'm done reading the question, you should have also finished answering so that you take a screenshot and send to your private page. So we are taking the test right now. So you need your pen and exercise book or notebook. Okay, good. Please, if we are ready, you can give me thumbs up or a reaction so that we start. Are we good to go, professors, Professor Charles and Prof. Eunice? Okay. So we begin. Question 1 or case 1. Remember, you are only to determine whether it's an upward communication, downward communication, diagonal or horizontal. I think we explained these concepts in our previous class. So 1, a production manager sends a memo to all production staff informing them of the new safety protocols. Is this an upward, downward, diagonal, or horizontal communication? So you have just 5 seconds to put down your answer. I read the question again. A manager sends a memo to all production staff informing them of new safety protocols. Okay. We go to case 2. Case 2. An employee emails their supervisor to request a meeting to discuss a project idea. An employee emails their supervisor to request a meeting to discuss a project idea. Okay, I'm sure you are done with that. Let's go to 3. The marketing manager meets with the sales team to discuss a new campaign strategy. The marketing manager meets with the sales team to discuss a new campaign strategy. Is this upward communication or downward or diagonal or horizontal? Case number 4. A team leader from the finance department collaborates with a team member from the IT department to resolve a technical issue. A team leader from the finance department collaborates with a team member from the IT department to resolve a technical issue. Okay. Are we good to go? Okay. Case 5. The CEO, which is the Chief Executive Officer, sends a company-wide email announcing a new business goal. The CEO sends a company-wide email announcing a new business goal. So that'll be upward, downward, diagonal, or horizontal. Number 6. An employee submits a suggestion. An employee submits a suggestion to the HR department, which is the Human Resource Department, for improving employee engagement. An employee submits a suggestion to the HR department for improving employee engagement. Is this upward, downward, diagonal, vertical, or horizontal? Number 7. The department heads meet with their team members to discuss performance feedback and goals. A department head meets with their team members to discuss performance feedback and goals. Number 8. A project team member emails a colleague from a different department to request data for a project report. A team member emails a colleague from a different department to request data for a project report. Okay. Number 9, as last but not the least, an employee discusses a concern with their supervisor, who then escalates the issue to the department head. An employee discusses a concern with their supervisor, who then escalates the issue to the department head. Then the last one, the operations manager meets with the marketing and sales team to discuss a new product launch. The operations manager meets with the marketing and sales team to discuss a new product launch plan. So, professors, these are the 10 cases for you to determine whether it is an upward communication, downward communication, diagonal, or horizontal. So I'll give you some 2 minutes to wrap up, and then I think you would take a screenshot and send to your private pages now or immediately before we continue our discussion. Thank you very much, professors. Okay, so our last discussion ended on the verbal and non-verbal communication, where we saw that the verbal communication involves the use of either written words or spoken words. So the written words would then be referred to as written communication. And some of the examples of written communication includes letters, circulars, emails, report, right? Or you could add text messaging, because we use words, we type words or we write the words. That's written communication. Then the oral, which is the spoken words, include interviews. In an interview, we use more of speaking or talking, right? More of oral communication than written. Meetings, presentation or teaching, telephone calls, and workshops, we do more of oral communication. Now, we also looked at the non-verbal, which has to do with communication that does not involve the use of words. So we don't use words here, whether written or spoken, but we use facial expressions, gestures, physical contact, body posture, okay, and symbols to communicate under the non-verbal. So we ended on the advantages and the disadvantages of this mode of communication. Now today we are continuing with our discussions, and I want us to focus on certain means of communication, specifically paying attention to its formality or it being informal. Now, if your father is the headmaster of a school where you find yourself, if you are not careful, you'll be confused as to whether to see him as your father or to see him as the headmaster of the school. Now, that is to establish the point that in business organizations, people may have informal relationships, right? So because the chief executive officer is my grandfather, I have that informal relationship with him, right? He's my grandfather. And of course, I don't need to write a letter to see or speak to my grandfather. But if we come into the perspective of he's the chief executive officer and maybe I'm the account officer, then in that line, I have to establish a formal relationship with my CEO. So I want us to look at this formal and informal communication that may occur in business organizations. Okay, so formal and informal communication. So we'll pick the formal communication first. So based on the scenario that I gave, how would you or what would you say about formal communication? I think Prof. Eunice, you will do this one because Charles' environment is not so conducive. But Charles, you can type in the chat as well. So what will be formal communication? Formal communication. Prof. Eunice, just share your thoughts or idea on it. Prof. Eunice, I don't want to feel you would want to say no idea. There is an idea, so at least based on the scenario I gave. Okay, so when we say formal communication, this is a type of communication that is official. Okay, it is official, it is professional, and it is structured. So this form of communication is conducive in a formal or in an official environment. And when we say official environment, this is an environment where lines of communication and authority has been clearly defined. So for example, if you enter some business organizations, before you can see the manager, you may have to go through the operations manager. So there's an official establishment of authority. So you cannot just bypass one authority and move to the other, right? So formal communication is a type of communication that is official, okay, official, or is a communication that occurs in an official setting. So you can put that down in the note. So it's a form of communication that occurs in official settings. So we say it is properly structured with clearly defined procedures for communication. So that is an official or formal communication. So it occurs in official settings. It is properly structured with clearly defined procedures for communication. So like the example I gave, if you're a customer and if you enter a bank and you want to do certain things, you have to follow that structured procedure, okay, because that setting permits only formal communication. Let's juxtapose this with the informal communication so that we can get the two concepts. So what then will be an informal communication? Your possible guess will be that it occurs in an unofficial setting, right? But or that is not the case. Prof. Eunice, would you want to try this one? Informal communication. Prof. Charles, if you have um anything to say, you can type in the chat. Okay, so informal here means that this type of communication occurs normally on personal relationships, or friendships. Okay, it is more casual, it is more relaxed, it is not strictly as it were process where it's not a strict process where you have to do A before you do B. It is more relaxed, it is more casual, and it occurs normally in social settings, personal relationships, or even unofficial working environment. Okay, so let me put something down for you. So the example I gave, if you are speaking to your father, I don't think you follow any kind of strict procedure. Well, unless your family is one that has established an official setting for communication, right? But if you are speaking to your father, it's more relaxed, it's more spontaneous. So informal communication refers to a casual and spontaneous interactions that does not follow formal procedures and protocols for communication. So it's more spontaneous, it's more casual, okay? It doesn't follow any strict protocols or procedure, right, for communication. Now, let's try to see if we can list examples of these forms of communication, right? Formal and informal. But I think we'll do that in the next session. So, professors, let's meet in the second session and continue our discussion on formal and informal communication. But Prof. Charles, I'll be expecting your exercise. Okay, so see you in the second session.